Maintaining a tough balancing act with both the U.S. and China.
Mr. Yi's presidency also comes at a time of rising tensions on the Korean peninsula. He's pledged to pursue a pragmatic diplomacy approach, warning that rapid changes in the global order, such as rising protectionism and increasing trade tensions, could jeopardize the country's survival. So for more, we have Jean Lee, presidential chair at the East-West Center, and she joins us live from Honolulu. Jean, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I want to start by asking you about what happened during campaigning. The new president saying he's not in a rush to sign a trade deal with the United States. Now we are hearing he's set to hold talks with President Trump, possibly as early as today. So what has happened? Was that just campaign rhetoric? Or is it really recognition, that tariffs are going to have a severe impact on the South Korean economy, and any potential deal, I guess, that Donald Trump reaches with Xi Jinping or Kim Jong-un could also have, some sort of a impact on South Korea as well?
Absolutely. All of that. Thank you for having me. I just got off the plane from Seoul, so I was there in the run-up to the election and, of course, for the election itself. And the economy is one of his main priority, one of his main priorities in terms of his domestic challenges. But a big part of that has to do with what happens with this tariff negotiation with the Trump administration. And so, absolutely, there is no time for the South Korean to waste, because this is a country that has not had a president for 6 months, and that includes the arrival of President Trump's second term, the start of his second term. And so that time, they've had negotiators in Seoul, they've had negotiators in DC, Washington, DC, but what they have not had is that leader-to-leader phone call or summit that is very important to South Korea, and very important, especially at a time right now when your country's economy relies on the outcome of this negotiation. So absolutely, I think that having a call with President Trump is very high on the list to show that the country is back on track and that they are ready to negotiate. Now, in terms of telling his people that he's going to take it slowly, the Trump administration would love to see South Korea or Japan take the lead in setting an example for those negotiations. But what President Lee needs to do is tell his people, no, I'm watching out for our interests, and I'm going to take this slowly and make sure that we get the best possible deal for South Korea. So that's what that is all about. But absolutely, when you talk about some of the other issues, no time to waste, really, in making sure that the United States and South Korea understand that they still have the strong relationship, even though there's a new administration in place. And this is an administration in Seoul led by a party that has been known for being a little bit more nationalistic than the previous ruling party. So there are some concerns that they have to allay on the part of Washington, right? They need to make sure that they convey to Washington that they are still valuing that alliance with the United States that is so important to regional security in Northeast Asia. And then they're also going to try to signal, he's going to try to signal to China that they are valuing that relationship as well. So I will say that there's a proverb in South Korea that the Koreans think of themselves as a shrimp among whales, a tiny country sandwiched among superpowers. And this is precisely what we're seeing right now, is trying to navigate the balance of powers in this region with very big personalities.
Yeah, you mentioned both optimism and caution when it comes to U.S. ROK alliance. Under Yi, he's previously made some controversial statements that have alarmed the U.S. At the same time, he did signal some openness towards Beijing as well. Could we expect the U.S.-South Korea alliance to deepen or plateau or potentially fray as tensions between the U.S. and China intensify?
The new president clearly is aware that there are concerns because of past statements he has made, past directions his party has gone when it comes to the relationship with the United States. Now, at home with the South Koreans, and I would say also with the North Koreans, the party has tried to foster a kind of nationalism, and that sometimes comes at the expense of the relationship with the United States. But he has been very clear campaigning that he considers that relationship to be an important one, And so let's see. It's a bit more of a moderate centrist approach than we've seen in the past. And I think what South Koreans will be watching for is he going to stick to that? Is he going to stick to that more moderate approach and make sure that that relationship is strong? Because the security situation has changed quite dramatically in the last few years. So it's a very different scenario than it was when his predecessor from the party, Moon Jae-in, was president. That is because North Korea has certainly amped up its capacity, its weapons arsenal, and now has this relationship with Russia that has a lot of powers in the region very concerned.
Right. Jean, as President Yi prepares for that phone call, and we have the deadline as well, apparently today to offer the best deal, does he have any cards to play at all with Donald Trump? I mean, I've come across several reports that say shipbuilding is an area that South Korea is good at, might possibly offer something for the United States.
Yes, absolutely. We're hearing a lot about shipbuilding. Now, this is one area that might surprise some people to know that South Korea is one of the world leaders and that the United States is a little bit weak on, right? And so this is one area where South Korea perhaps has some, I would say has some leverage and may bring into the negotiation if they're very savvy. And I do think that they're going to bring that into the negotiation. We do know that President Trump, the Trump administration, the defense secretary have prioritized security in the Indo-Pacific region, and maritime security is part of that as it figures out how it's going to deal with rivalry with China. And so ships, right? Warships are a big part of that. Having South Korea's help in terms of repairs and that type of maintenance and being able to do it in the region is something that South Korea certainly could offer. And that could be part of a broader negotiation strategy as these two countries work out a package that includes trade, tariffs, and military security.
Okay. Speaking of security and inter-Korean relations, Mr. Yi has pledged to seek peace with North Korea while maintaining deterrence. But with Pyongyang, drawing closer to Moscow, as you mentioned, and accelerating weapons development, is there any realistic opening for diplomacy at this moment?
It's very hard to see at this moment. And we should remember that in the last few years, North Korea has taken a very tough stance toward South Korea with a more conservative government in power over the last couple of years. They have taken a very tough stance on the inter-Korean relationship. Whether or not that is a permanent shift, I think remains to be seen. So from North Korea's perspective, having a more progressive president in Seoul is certainly something that's more attractive. But at this moment, we would have to see elements change. We have to see what happens with their relationship, North Korea's relationship with Russia. We have to see what happens with China, and whether there's any opening for an improvement in that inter-Korean relationship. But very hard to see right now.
And Jean, related to this particular issue of the of the Korean Peninsula, we are hearing that the United States is considering, redeploying a troop drawdown, possibly from South Korea as well. Now, is that going to be a problem for President Yi, or is this going to be a situation where Trump maybe rekindles his bromance with Kim Jong-un and everyone happily agrees to some sort of a drawdown that will make all parties a bit more comfortable?
So I have seen those reports, first reported by the Wall Street Journal, and I have seen that the Pentagon has denied that that is the case. Of course, the cost of hosting U.S. troops in South Korea was something that President Trump was very fixated on in the first term. So we can expect him to return to that negotiation. He would like for the South Koreans to pay more to host U.S. troops in South Korea. Now, President Trump has also, during his first term, talked about drawing down some of the troops who are in South Korea. However, I will say that we recently hosted General Xavier Brunson, who is the commander in charge of the 600,000 plus South Korean, U.S. and UN troops on the Korean Peninsula in South Korea. And he has made the statement very clearly that each and every one of those troops is absolutely necessary in Korea to deter against North Korean aggression. And he's also suggested that we should think about these troops as being a deterrence against other security concerns in the region as well. So I think that's a very interesting case that he has made. Now, we'll see what happens with these negotiations going forward, but we can also look to what President Trump has negotiated during his first term. And I think also you're absolutely right that we have to leave open the possibility that he will want to rekindle that bromance with Kim Jong-un. They clearly have a strong rapport. It's hard, again, to see that happening right away, but it's something that we need to prepare for as a possibility down the road.
All right, Jean, we'll have to leave it there for now, and we'll let you go now and unpack from your trip from Seoul. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Jean Lee, a presidential chair at the East-West Center.